Choose for sight for the new moon. I found the meditation before this prayer in a prayer book, the last of which incorporates the wisdom from this psalm and illustrates how Peter lived his life. God, the approach of another month reminds us of the flight of time and the change of seasons. Month follows month. The years of our lives are few and fleeting. Teach us to number our days that we may use each precious moment wisely. May no day pass without bringing us closer to some worthy achievement. Interestingly, medical calculations were a big part of Peter's career as an industrial engineer. But this counting of days is existential, not mathematical. It reminds us to appreciate every moment of our lives, which is something that Peter beautifully modeled for us. Peter Jacobson was blessed with an adventurous, loving, productive, and long life. After graduation from Georgia Tech, Peter was an executive officer on the USS Neskelen in Antarctica, during which time he built camps at 3 different sites and where he developed his lifelong passion for penguins. Over the years, Peter's family and friends gifted him with an impressive collection of over 400 penguins. His granddaughter, Kenna, remembers listening to Peter share for hours about his travels to Antarctica during his Navy service. showing her pictures of him during this time and reading a very interesting technical paper of his on his experience there. His love of penguins must have made building the penguin tank at SeaWorld a sheer joy for Peter. And not only a joy for him, but also for the generations after him. Each time Elena took her children to SeaWorld, she proudly told them that their grandfather was the one to build the penguin tank. After the Navy, in 1957, Peter was fortunate to become the project engineer for Lenox Square in Atlanta, where he learned how to build shopping centers. In 1960, he became a general contractor and built a series of Zayre department stores and adjoining centers around the country and also in San Juan. In 1964, he married Anne, and together they had Reed and Elena. Between 1966 and 68, Peter formed a company to serve as general contractor for Plaza Las Americas in San Juan. This first mall in the Caribbean was built in only 16 months. In 1969, Peter became a general contractor for a series of impressive projects in both Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. He was one of the founders of the Reform Synagogue Temple Beth Shalom, where he also served as president. Reed reflects that the words which best describe his dad are thoughtful, intelligent, adventurous, great sense of humor, always liked to move forward, to challenge himself, and find stories to tell. Peter loved culture and intellectual stimulation. He loved NASCAR racing and being in the outdoors. He loved building things. Eugenia showed me many radio-controlled model airplanes that he built. He loved meeting new and interesting people, and he found something new and interesting in everyone. Peter danced to the beat of his own drum. Elena and Reed have fond memories of their childhood in Puerto Rico and island hopping with their family. Elena enjoyed the fact that wherever they flew, their parents always knew everybody. Boating in the Caribbean, playing on the beach in San Juan, flying in a private plane from Houston to St. Bart's, just the four of them. Once they got lost above the clouds and were running out of gas. They used a Caribbean vacation map to figure out which islands they were over and where the fueling station island was. Peter's family had a powerboat in Puerto Rico and enjoyed motoring back and forth between the islands. During a visit to Puerto Rico, they rented a sailboat. Reed saw his dad as a great sailor, when in fact, he later realized that he had never sailed a boat before. Peter knew how to navigate the waters and tie up a boat. He followed a sailboat that was leaving the pier, taking the advice of the guy who rented him the sailboat. Next thing they knew, they were going from island to island on the Caribbean. Reed remembers sitting down with his dad and working on schoolwork, especially geometry and physics, subjects that he was particularly interested in. He finally recalls riding on his dad's motorcycle with him, and he also remembers how good a teacher his dad was, especially when teaching him skills like driving, flying planes, driving a motorcycle, and boating. Reed felt like he was always on an adventure with his dad. They never stayed sedentary. They were always on a boat or a plane, and this made them feel like very active participants in the world. Since they lived just off the beach in Puerto Rico, life was full of coconuts, sea urchins, swimming, and a lot of fun. Reed was always curious about his dad's construction work, and fascinated by the fact that his dad could show him the fruits of his labor. After Puerto Rico, Peter and his family moved to Houston. They were members of Beth Israel for many years. Peter was very proud to be Jewish. Elena fondly remembers basically living at Astroworld and how they couldn't wait to get their season pass because they'd get dropped off during the day and picked up at 11:30 in the evening. She was so proud of her dad's remodel of the second floor of Sharpstown Mall. Doing the engineering work of a mall that your friends went to and hung out at was special, she lovingly recalls. He had to bring in more support for the second floor without closing the first floor of the mall. Elena remembers wearing a bright yellow t-shirt from Good Time Charlie's until it was in shreds and the pipe organ on the second floor. When she was older, Elena recalls many fun and adventurous activities that she and her dad did together, such as skydiving and scuba diving, being with dolphins, skiing, and race car driving, both with her dad and husband Dave. Elena remembers the great memories her dad had of his college pranks. How meaningful that Evan inherited Peter's cello and has played all her high school concerts on it. Elena proudly remembers her dad building Waterworld next to Astroworld. When Waterworld was being built, the engineers on the job realized that some of the pylons for the water slide were in the middle of the white water rapids ride. The engineer had to design software for this slide, but not a computer to run it on. Peter brought this engineer to 10-year-old Reed, who had an Apple II Plus. Reed loaded this software on his computer and helped design this multi-slide water slide. At first, Reed designed the steepest and most dangerous water slide possible and showed the engineer. After that, he showed the engineers the real design. Reed is proud that as a 10-year-old, he had such a large part in this slide's design, and this made his dad very proud as well. Anne and Peter were married for 23 years. Joan, Peter's second wife, was married to Peter for 22 years. Peter was a father to Joan's children, Michelle, Christine, and Jerry, and grandfather and mentor to their children. Peter went back to Puerto Rico to do a 30-year renovation on the shopping mall he built, and rejoined him for a bit. Then, for the 50th anniversary of the shopping mall, Eugenia went back with Peter. Kenya shares about her grandfather. Whenever we visited, he would take us out on his boat and let us steer it out on the lake behind his house. We also fed the catfish, which was fun, and we grandkids always looked forward to this. He'd draw stick figure cats on letters and had nicknames for everyone. He was just generally an amicable and upbeat guy that radiated warmth and good humor. Peter and Eugenia had their first date a day or two before Christmas in 2013 at Beck's Prime. Eugenia chose Beck's Prime because she knew the wait staff, so she felt safe there. They spoke for 2 hours and discovered their mutual interests of opera and classical music. After their first date, Peter went to Barnes & Noble in the mall during the Christmas rush and bought a book they had talked about, Bridget Jones is a Widow. The gesture made a huge impression on not only Eugenia, but also on Beck's Prime waitstaff. What do I mean? Well, since Peter didn't know where Eugenia lived, he brought the book back to Kenny, one of the waiters Eugenia knew at Beck's Prime. Little did they know after they met that they lived off the same freeway entrance. They lived on other sides of the freeway, off of the same main street. Peter and Eugenia had a 6-month courtship, and after vacationing in San Antonio, they committed to each other. Eugenia met Peter's sister Liz's family in the fall of 2014 at the bat mitzvah of Liz's granddaughter. Every year, around February or March, Liz rents an apartment in Naples, and each year, Peter and Eugenia enjoyed being there with Liz. Eugenia and Peter's civil marriage ceremony was in Sugar Land on December 18, 2018, and a religious ceremony followed at the temple in Atlanta, with Rabbi Alvin Sugarman officiating 1 month later on January 20th, 2019. Miss Daisy, in the moving Driving Miss Daisy, is a composite of 4 women, one of whom was Peter and Liz's mother, Fanny Kahn Jacobson. And the temple's bombing is the key event in this movie. The temple is the oldest synagogue in Atlanta and where Peter and his sister Liz grew up. For these reasons, it was very important to Eugenia to marry Peter there. Eugenia misses all her rituals with Peter, from sitting on the couch watching a football game with him, to going on Dean Dalton opera tours, eating out, and having friends over. Things that Peter and Eugenia quarreled over include the smell of beef kidneys, the eternal struggle for control over the TV remote. It's very lonely for Eugenia these days. She's no longer able to scold Peter for hogging the remote. It's often the little everyday things in life that creates a beautiful tapestry of memories. Eugenia fondly remembers going to Reed and Jen's for Talia's first birthday party. This is where she met Peter's children, their mother Anne, and the grandchildren. Reed enjoyed and will miss most about his dad, his great sense of humor, his energy, his ability to tell stories, his inquisitive nature, and problem-solving ability, and the fact that he followed his curiosity and could work with anyone. Reed carries with him his dad's love of music, art, architecture, flight, boats, and travel. Peter loved the movie Airplane. Reed remembered sitting next to him watching this movie and his laughing so hard that he almost passed out from losing his breath. Reed will also miss his dad's ability to really listen and really be present and empathetic with whoever he was speaking. Peter was a master at many things. He was a fabulous pilot, a boat captain. He was friendly to everyone without judgment. Reed and Elena gained their dad's love of adventure. Peter was a huge fan of Victor Borge. So embarrassed, I'm sorry. The Danish American comedian, conductor, and classical pianist. At one of his shows, Victor asked, "Would the young lady in the audience refrain from laughing so I can get on with my show?" Well, the person laughing was no young lady, it was Peter. Peter enjoyed motorcycle trips with his motorcycle gang. He was also an amateur race car driver and drove on many racetracks throughout the US. Peter and his friend Bob Hemmett went to Steers Point in California, where there is a non-traditional track. After they came back to Houston, they agreed to return in 1 month and race the track together. When they returned, the lady at the desk innocently said, "Hi, Mr. Hammett, you're back so soon. Good to see you." Well, they still raced, but Peter went into a mud bank and got mud in the car's engine. Peter was also a flight instructor. He loved to fly. He was a natural teacher and taught dozens of people how to fly radio-controlled planes later in life. He had a razor-sharp brain, even at 88. Peter always wanted to be the best he could be and wanted to work with people who were not only good at what they did, but also who had hobbies and interests. Several months ago, Peter drove Virginia to the seamstress, and on the way home, he noticed a homeless couple living under a bridge. Every Sunday, for 2 or 3 months, he would buy them non-perishable food at H-E-B and then Papa John's Pizza, and would bring this food to them. After they had to relocate, he found them again until they disappeared, and he spent several weeks looking for this homeless couple. Peter was a teacher, coach, and mentor to so many people. Thinking about all Peter's professional accomplishments and hobbies, I imagine that most of us would take multiple lifetimes to complete what Peter did in just one. Let's return to the meditation on the prayer about the new moon. Teach us to number our days, that we may use each precious moment wisely. May no day pass without bringing us closer to some worthy achievements. Peter certainly used each of his precious moments wisely and graciously shared his worthy achievements with so many in his world. May his memory forever be a blessing, as we say together, Amen. Amen. From Job, parts of chapter 28. There is no replacing a person of wisdom. There are mines for silver and places where gold is refined. Iron is taken from the earth and copper is smelted from the rock. But where can wisdom be found? And where is the source of understanding? There is no replacing a person of wisdom. I'd now like to call up Reed for some reflections about his father.
Wow. Well, first of all, I'm just looking at the room, and this is amazing. This is a good crowd. We should all be so lucky to have a crowd like this. And I heard tickets were going for 5 too. I really didn't prepare. I was going to prepare something. It would only seem fitting to talk about Dad by reciting a really corny poem, because he did, as our family knows, we had a history of really corny poems, and so I started writing a corny poem, but then it just didn't. I'll get you a corny poem soon. I just look around and think about the impact that Dad had, and how everybody here knows him from a very different part of life, a different part of his life, right? We have hobbyists, we have family members, we have workers, people from working in various different industries, and everybody loved him, and he made an impact on in every aspect of his life. He was never a wilting flower, a wallflower, he made an impact in everything he did, and he loved everybody, and he really loved people too. Like you could tell that he was really thoughtful about everybody that he met. And he could tell a story, like it wouldn't just be a thing that he did. He never just did a thing to do a thing. He did a thing to get a really good story out of it. And so everything we did was story worthy, everything was a little adventure. Things would go wrong, but they would go wrong to tell a story that would make your life a lot better. And there was always a positive spin to it. It was always conquering something. It was always moving forward. It was always being a better person. And so that's what you want to do, right? So that's really it. I mean, we're going to carry around stories and hugs and moments of listening to each other, right? And I'm not just saying me and my dad, but every single person here had a really, had intimate moments with him. And they were done with a true heart. And with a laugh, and with the end result was that you may as well have a good time, for crying out loud. And you may as well have a hobby. You may as well have something to go for. You may as well build something. You may as well love the world, love penguins, love airplanes, keep your eyes in the clouds. And I just think about, to me, I see him, and my vision of him going off into the next world is, I keep thinking about the great Waldo Pepper, and I just think of Dad in a biplane, just deciding to go and going off into a cloud, and then imagine. So, thank you. Love you all. Thanks.
Beautiful memories. I'd now like to call up Fernando Delgado, Peter's best friend and fly field buddy during the last 5 years of Peter's life.
Well, I was going to have something really profound prepared, but as I started writing and thinking about my time with Peter, 2 hours into it, typing, and what looked to be the volume 1 of Keats, I realized that I couldn't put down on paper what I felt about it. Please bear with me. I have spent a lot of time with Peter over the last 5 years. And we did a lot of talking, and we did a lot of flying, and a lot of lying to each other, telling stupid stories and cracking each other up. And there were days when we both felt terrible, and we would put our arm around each other, and I'd hold the plane, and he'd hold the radio, and we'd make our way out to the fence. And sometimes we leaned against the fence just because we wanted to fly. And Peter is the most wonderful man that I've ever met in my life. He never saw a challenge that he didn't want to take. He never saw a problem that he didn't want to fix. And he never saw anybody that he didn't want to help. And I just enjoyed his company so much. There were days when we just got out there just because we wanted to spend some time together, and I just had to tell lies to each other. And see, we could tell the best story. And one of the other things that he and I did is we spent time talking about our lives. And Eugenia, he adored you. He loved you so much. And he was so happy when you would ask him to do something, or you give him a task, go run this errand for me, go run this errand for me, He was just, when he talked about you, his eyes just sparkled. And he's so much. And you know what, he's so much. It's kind of like one of the things that he used to say all the time. We talked every day. We flew almost every day. And we would start the day with either I'd get a text from him that says, let's go punch holes in the sky, because that's what he really loved to do. And we'd go out there, and like I said, just to be out on this beautiful day and, share some time and something that he really loved to do. And even when he really didn't feel up to it, we always managed to get at least one flight in. So we felt like we did something. That was an accomplishment for us. And he touched me so deeply. The very last thing that I texted to him, the day before he died, when he told me he was going to get some diagnostics, and he would be able to fly for a little while. I texted, well, I guess I'll have to go to the field and crash a plane in your honor. And I made the commitment to do that, and I'm very good at it. There will be no problem. But I've been out only a couple of times the last 2 weeks to the field to talk to the other members of the club that also know Peter. In all the years that I talked to people out there, and I never heard anybody say anything negative about Peter. Everybody cared about Peter because he was so giving and he was so loving, and I never heard him say a derogatory word about anybody. No matter how much they shaped him. There were a few times when I'm sure he wanted to say a few things to me, but you can't describe in words what he was. You just can't. To me, it's my life always. He's always going to be alive. And he really will be. And I'm so thankful that I had the opportunity to spend time with him doing something that I knew he truly loved. Thank you.
Rhonda, I can't imagine how difficult that was to get up and share. Thank you for sharing those topics. If you're able, I'm going to ask you to rise for the El Male Rachamim prayer. First, I'll recite it in English so you'll know what I'm saying in Hebrew. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Peter Jacobson, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect rest in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace. And let us say together, Amen. El Male Rachamim, Shochem Baruchim, Hamsei Menucha Nekona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, B'ma'alot Kedoshim, Utzoharim, Kezoha Harakia Masilim, Et Nishmat, Sor Ben Benyamin, Utagora, Shehalach L'olamo, V'gan Eden Tiyeh Menuchato, Ana Ba'al Harachamim, Hasiretu B'seter Knafecha L'olamim, Utzvar b'tzvar ha'chaim et nishmato, Adonai hu nachalato, v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar, Amen. You may be seated. Our next prayer is called We Remember Them. At the rising sun and at its going down, we remember them. At the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. At the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. At the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. At the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. At the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. As long as we live, they too will live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. The last traditional Jewish prayer is the mourner's cottage, and it can be found in your pamphlet, both in the traditional Hebrew on the front, but probably more importantly to most, inside in transliteration. If you are able to rise, please do for the mourner's cottage. And interestingly, this prayer, you think because of its title, that this would be somber, but it's actually all about exalting and praising God's name, because we don't necessarily think to do that during a time of death. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei haba, v'yama tibrach chirutei, v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon, u'v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'adala u'bizman kariv v'imru, Amen. Yehi Shemei Rabba Mevarach Le'olam Omei Amaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpachar v'yitpolam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal Shemei Dekudashah Barichu Le'elah Minkol Berchata V'shirata Shushbachata V'nechamata Damiman V'almam V'imru, Amen. Yehi Shlomo Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru, Amen. Oseh Shalom V'Rama, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom, Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru, Amen. You may be seated. Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yahaseh Shalom, Yahaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel, V'imru, Amen. As God makes peace above, may God make peace below among all of us as we say, Amen. I'd like to share some excerpts from John O'Donohue's For Grief prayer. When you lose someone you love, your life becomes strange. The ground beneath you gets fragile. Your thoughts make your eyes unsure, and some dead echo drags your voice down, where words have no confidence. Your heart has grown heavy with loss, and through this loss has wounded others too. No one knows what has been taken from you when the silence of absence deepens. Days when you have your heart back, you can function well. until in the middle of work or another encounter, suddenly, with no warning, you are ambushed by grief. It becomes hard to trust yourself. All you can depend on now is that sorrow will remain faithful to itself. More than you, it knows the way and will find the right time to pull and pull the rope of grief until that coil of tears has reduced to its last drop. Gradually, you will learn acquaintance with the invisible form of your departed. And when the work of grief is done, the wound of loss will heal, and you will have learned to wean your eyes from that gap in the air and to be able to enter the hearth in your soul where your loved one has awaited your return all the time. There's a beautiful verse that I recently discovered by Stuart Kestenbaum, which to me says so much. We are here for a moment of a story that is longer than all of us. And our last prayer, some excerpts from Psalm 147. God heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. God reckons the number of stars, giving each one its name. Great and full of power is God, whose wisdom is beyond reckoning. God gives courage to us and brings hope to those bereft. So may God always be with us. At this time, I would like to thank our funeral home and call up our funeral director.
On behalf of myself and the entire staff and management of the Settlers Call Company Funeral Directors at Sugar Creek, I'd like to first start off by thanking Rabbi Stotts, of course, for her kind help and inspiring words to this family and everyone who spoke on today's program for Mr. Peter. This will now conclude our services for Mr. Peter. The family has arranged the reception right next door in our event room, and we will go at this time.
I promised myself I wouldn't do that.
That was a really good.
So much to say.
I'm so glad you were able to get up and do that. From the heart.
Would you say my name?
I